Hi, Mark Small is Civil Discourse Now on August 5th, 2022. Indiana has possibly the worst legislature of any state in the United States. Harrison Ullman was a journalist here in Indianapolis and characterized it as that. It used to be said that a way to pass a bill through the General Assembly in Indiana was to toss a bag full of money over a transom in the Hotel Claypool in the dead of night. Hotel Claypool isn't there anymore. People don't have transoms. Paper bags would be like really wasteful of resources. And why use paper currency? The dead of night still exists. But when you have somebody making an innately prejudicial statement about freedoms in our country, and that individual is a member of the General Assembly, it gets really bad. Representative John Young of Indiana said in defense of Senate Bill 1 that imposes restrictions that Indiana wants to have on women's reproductive rights, referred to the First Church of Cannabis that had sought recognition under the Religious Freedom Restoration Act several years ago. And he said that there's no need to recognize all religions. And he called it reordered liberty. Now, let's look at the history of religion in this country. For tens of thousands of years, North American continent didn't exist with Christianity. Now, that kind of makes you wonder, like, if they didn't know about the New Testament over here, how could they be saved? They wouldn't have known about the New Testament until, well, the Vikings didn't carry over a copy because they weren't mass produced by then, like the 700s or 900s, whatever, Common Era. Only about the 15th century did they start, 14th or 16th century, 17th century, they started bringing them over. And then rather than really converting to Christianity, the indigenous peoples were dying from exposure to diseases that the Europeans brought over. But all that time before, they had their own religions. And actually, the United States didn't recognize any religion as controlling the United States. In a treaty with Tripoli, the United States said in this like 1809 or something, said this is not a Christian country. If you look at the framers of the Constitution, the people who wrote it at the convention in 1787, a large number of them were deists. That means in modern parlance, a lot of them were agnostics. Now, people who go out there and lie for the Lord, like Micah Beckwith, for example, will say, oh, no, this is George Washington invoked God in his inaugural. George Washington wasn't a Christian. The minister of the church that he attended every week nearly said he's not a Christian. He never took communion. But they've got to create this myth because they want to lie to you to get you to believe that they're the only truth in town, and they're not. To read this from Representative John Young from Greenwood, I guess, is abhorrent. It is against what we hold as being true. All religions are people are supposed to have freedom to practice them. Now, if you've got a religion that, for example, has rituals based on cannibalism, might have to give second thought to that. If it's adherence on a regular basis, drink blood, eat flesh, might be a good reason to say, well, you wouldn't want to do that, right? Of course, that is communion. You are drinking the blood and eating the flesh. Under some churches' views, transubstantiation occurs when the sacraments are blessed, and the people can go ahead and partake, and they can worship. And that's not just like a wafer, that's not just wine, that's blood, that's flesh. Now, let's look at what Representative John Young had to say. There's no point in ordered liberty. Ordered liberty, in his view, I guess, means you don't have liberty unless you're Christian. Unless you're Christian, you can't practice your religion because we're only going to recognize certain religions. There was a case for the United States versus Ballard. It was handed down in 1944, and I referred to this the other day. Okay, fix my podcast title, Mr. Levin. Thank you, Grand Poobah. I wish I could do that. I don't know what you're talking about. Let's go to it right now. We've got Ballard versus United States versus Ballard. People were prosecuted for promoting something from their church. They're making money off of it, and the court said this. As far as this court sees the issues, it is immaterial what these defendants preached or wrote or taught in their classes. They are not going to be permitted to speculate on the actuality of the happening of those incidents. The religious beliefs of the defendants cannot be an issue in this court. And as the court also said, there's a kind of a spiffy quote here. The religious views espoused by respondents might seem incredible, if not preposterous, to most people. But if those doctrines are subject to trial before a jury charged with finding their truth or falsity, then the same can be done with the religious beliefs of any sect. Now, we'll address Christianity, because obviously I'm going to say that Representative John Young of Greenwood probably espouses the beliefs of the Christian faith, and if I'm wrong about that, he can correct me. Otherwise, realize that Christianity arguably cribbed off of other religions. There were other religions that had a son of God die for the sins of mankind and resurrected after 3 days to cleanse the world of sin. That's not an original thought. And if you look at when Christianity occurred, it's how it sprang up. That was during a time of great nationalism in Palestine. Jews wanted their homeland. A lot of people died at that period of time, but it wasn't about Christianity. It was about Judaism. Now, another thing about Christianity, and this goes to whether Christ existed, you're dealing with a time in which Romans were meticulous about documenting events in their empire. We know, for example, that if the events as described in Luke are true, that Jesus Christ would have been born in the year 6 Common Era, because that's the year that Herod actually engaged in the tax collection effort, also called a census, for which Mary and Joseph were traveling when she went into labor and they had to go into a manger and all that stuff occurred, and Jesus was born. But we don't have any records from Jerusalem, which actually wasn't a backward place. It wasn't a strange land. It was at the crossroads of a lot of commerce in the Middle East. It had been subject to a lot of wars. So you have no mention of a person who claims to be the Messiah coming in greeted by multitudes. You have no mention of the leading criminal of the day, Barabbas, being given liberty rather than being crucified. None of that's mentioned. There's no history of it. There's no contemporary record of Jesus Christ existing as a person from that time. There are two vague references. One is Josephus, who was a historian at the time, who said that there was a great teacher and philosopher named Jesus. He doesn't say anything about him being God or the Son of God. Then you had Philo, who said basically the same thing. Now, part of the reason that their narratives are discredited is because in ensuing centuries, Christian scholars, although I wouldn't call them that, tried to correct the record so there would be a path so that you could say, well, we got evidence of Jesus having existed there. And so they put in a whole bunch of things that weren't true. So you want to talk about it? Jesus didn't exist. If you're going to start talking about how religions, well, we have to have, we can only recognize certain religions in ordered liberty. Well, then I'll tell you what. The religions that were recognized on this continent before the Europeans got here, well, I'd say that by default, they're the religions we should pursue. Not those? Well, how about we go back to religions that predate Christianity and Judaism? We could go to Hinduism, older than Judaism. And there are other religions that are older than Christianity. And we're not going to win anything by saying my God's better than yours, but we certainly don't win anything by saying you can't have the same quality or rights as we have because you don't have a legitimate religion. The last couple of months, we've seen fantastic photographs of the universe that a space telescope has shown all these galaxies going to infinity. To put it in the context of Christian rivalries between different sects, do you think that if there is a God that created everything in all that huge cosmos going on and on, that God really cared about whether you were baptized by complete immersion or only by sprinkling? I think that what we have to look at, Representative John Young, he's a shithead. Sorry to use that word. Connecting head with his body probably is a misnomer. All religions are equal. All religions get equal rights, unless they're doing something like killing somebody. They're actively killing somebody, then if it's the teaching of that religion, then you arrest the people for going out and killing people. You don't say that their religious belief is illegal. This is absurd. Indiana, it seems, lately is going back further and further in time. My hopes are we'll correct that negative movement. I'm Mark Small. Civil Discourse Now. Peace, love, happiness, freedom, all that. Nanu, nano, may the force be with you always. These are times. These really are times.